Machinery getting abandoned isn't a new thing. When equipment becomes broken, outdated, or simply no longer required, many people find it easiest to simply leave it where it is and move on. For railways, rolling stock is usually broken up for scrap as it's more economical, but there have been a few cases of engines and wagons becoming abandoned for one reason or another. None, however, might be more unique than the fleet of locomotives that, somehow, ended up in the middle of the desert. By the late 1800s, Bolivia had become a massive exporter of minerals, with mining making up a significant part of the country's economy. British engineers were brought to Bolivia by President Aniceto Arce after the War of the Pacific to help develop their railways, with Arce believing that a strong transportation system would help the country flourish despite Bolivia losing its connection to the ocean to Chile. After coming to an arrangement whereby Chile would allow Bolivia to use their ports, railway development began in 1888, with the engineers settling on 2-foot 6-inch gauge rails for the line. Railway infrastructure proved to be tricky to develop as the railways mostly travelled through desert land, and so there was little access to water for the steam locomotives to use. As such, a series of pipes and reservoirs had to be constructed from the Andes in order to provide water to the railway. In 1890, the town of Uyuni was established as a centre of trade and to act as a hub to connect nearby mines to the ports in Chile where the minerals would be shipped from. To run the line, engines from Robert Stephenson and Company in Britain were initially bought over, but after being taken over by the Huanchaca Company, engines built by the Baldwin Locomotive Works and various other locomotive builders in the US were preferred instead. In 1913, the decision was made to change the railway to meter gauge tracks, and preferences switched back to British-built engines, specifically Garrett and Mayer engines built by Bayer Peacock. Workers on the railway seemed to prefer the American-built engines as they were rugged and easier to repair, but the British engines proved to be much better steamers, saving more on fuel than they cost to repair. As a result of all the traffic that came through, Uyuni became a booming trade town and a transportation hub for both passengers and goods alike. But by the 1940s, the boom slowly started turning into a bust. Plans to expand and develop the line in the area were discussed, but the local mines were slowly closing down, with the country's entire mining industry collapsing by the end of the decade. During this time, locomotives were sent to Uyuni station for repair, but as they weren't urgently needed due to the lack of mineral traffic, they were simply shunted out of the way along with carriages and various goods wagons until demand picked up again. Unfortunately, it never did. The yard the engines were stored in fell into disrepair, and the engines, left exposed to the salty desert winds, quickly started to deteriorate. Because of how remote Uyuni was from the rest of the railway network, managers of the railway felt that the cost of moving them to another depot either for scrapping or repair simply wasn't worth it, and instead decided to just leave the engines in the desert. Naturally, once folks realised that no one was coming back for the engines, people both local and from afar started to take parts from them as scrap or souvenirs, with some, more daring folks cutting up the engines themselves for metal. The conditions of the desert only helped speed up the engine's deterioration, leaving many rusted and eroded well beyond salvage. Among the engines are tender locomotives, Garretts, and Mayer locomotives. I've tried my best to find some before and after pictures of some of the other engines, but it's quite hard to confirm what's what given their current condition. Nowadays, the site has become somewhat of a tourist attraction, with many visitors coming to see the remains of the engines. Talks of turning the site into a museum have also arisen, but nothing much has come of it yet. While quite the macabre sight for most rail enthusiasts, the Uyuni train graveyard does give visitors the unique chance to get up close and personal with its exhibits. It's a shame these engines were simply left to rust, but I think you'll agree that, even as rusted shells, there's still a strange charm to them. Just don't expect to see any of them up and running anytime soon. Subscribe for more.